Good afternoon. Rules Committee will come to order, and thank you for joining us today as we consider H.R. 1994, the VA Accountability Act of 2015, and H.R. 3236, the Service Transportation and Veterans Healthcare Choice Improvement Act. H.R. 1994 would grant and provide for the removal or demotion of employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs based upon performance or misconduct. After last year's scandal, we learned that the VA is still plagued with mismanagement that has put the lives and the health of our veterans at risk. Quite honestly, I, along with a number of members, know that the VA has still not been able to fix their problems or themselves. Americans deserve a VA system that responsibly cares for our nation's heroes, our nation's veterans, which is why this bill would hold the VA and its employees accountable based upon their performance or misconduct. Said another way, no excuses. H.R. 3236 would provide a 3-month extension of authorizations for the Highway Trust Fund and allow the VA to use $3.3 billion more from the Veterans Choice Fund to pay for non-VA care provided to veterans patients through October the 1st. The Highway Trust Fund needs to be reauthorized by this Friday, and as I understand it, the Senate is attempting to pass a 1,000-page bill as we speak. The problem with the 1,000-page bill is people want us just to take their work and pass it, and we are not going to do that. We are going to reserve judgment. The gentleman, Bill Schuster, who is our young chairman of the Transportation Committee, needs an opportunity to make sure he can review this. And so I believe what we're going to do is take a step back today, and which is we're going to find out and review what's in the Senate bill, and if it passes, we're going to take the time necessary to give our chairman, Bill Schuster, time to listen, to read, to understand, and to prepare himself and this body from a perspective of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee here in the House before going forward with any extension of the highway bill. By reauthorizing the Highway Trust Fund through October 29th, this bill gives Bill Schuster and each member of this committee and this House an opportunity to read it, be prepared to speak back to the American people. I believe we must have a highway transportation bill, and we will, but it will be one that we say we can read the bill before we passed it. I want to thank Chairman Miller, Jeff Miller, for the awesome job that he is doing on behalf of our not only Congress, the House of Representatives, but also for the American people. He has spent a lot of hard work on H.R. 1994. He's working with a very difficult circumstance. And I know you have a difficult task of making sure that you represent this body and the American people when you talk to VA. But change and reform is what I appreciate most out of what Jeff Miller is doing. His leadership matters. I know that we're also joined by our 2 Democrat friends who will make sure that as members of this committee, they will have an opportunity to speak very clearly about their ideas about what reform is. And I believe that this committee will allow an opportunity for that idea to be discussed and debated on the floor. Because the 3 of you are here to discuss H.R. 94 and your committee's portion of H.R. 3236, I would first ask your testimony on both bills. So I'll ask for you to just differentiate those 2 bills. We're going to take up a part of it straight up and then part of it in the transportation bill. That way the committee will be able to answer questions of each of you on both the bills that are before this committee. We're delighted that you're here. Before I defer to any of you, I want to yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts for any opening statement he'd like to make. The gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the bill, the veterans bill that we're going to be considering today, I have a lot of problems with it, quite frankly. It would essentially make the Department of Veterans Affairs the only agency with at-will employment, and there are issues about adequate due process that I'm concerned about. And look, I think we all want to make sure our veterans get the very best care possible, but I also think we ought not to, diminish the incredible work that so many people who work at the VA do each and every day. And I sometimes feel that, that in our attempt to try to find remedies to problems, we sometimes go a little bit overboard. And I worry that, that good people could potentially lose their jobs. Let me just say one other thing about the transportation bill. I appreciate the fact that we don't want to have a 1,000-page bill thrust upon us and have us look at it within 24 hours. But I think the last time I counted, we had 32 extensions, 34 extensions of the transportation, 34. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but I mean, clearly, this Congress isn't doing its work. We should have had a long-term transportation highway bill a long time ago. And so, to kind of punt again for a couple of months because we don't want to read a 1,000-page bill seems to me to be kind of a flimsy excuse when we've already had 34 extensions. I think we could do a little bit better than that, Mr. Chairman. And, I think governors, Democrats and Republicans are just really frustrated with the fact that they can't plan. And I'll tell you, for all those people who complain about the economy's not recovering fast enough, we got to fix this. And with that, I yield back I'll yield to the gentlelady from New York.
I just want to echo what you said, Mr. McGovern. I represent an area with a very short season to be able to build anything, and we've lost this year. Given the fact, as we talk about trying to recover this economy, and we have this crumbling infrastructure, is really does not speak well for us. And certainly does not say much to us that we're going to run out of town and throw this thing down a hole. It's sort of the Scarlett O'Hara way of running the United States government. I'll think about that tomorrow. Enough of that already. This is really appalling. I couldn't support this. Thank you, Mr. McGovern.
I yield back. I was going to say it's the Rhett Butler way of.
Well, gentleman yields back.
I don't give a damn, but I'll yield. I'll yield.
Well, and
Absolutely right. And there's a little Alice in Wonderland in here.
yeah, there really is, but I don't think that the gentleman or the gentlewoman was suggesting we just take the 1,000-page bill.
Come on, look.
Well, we have to wait for the other body, and they are now doing their work, and we are going to receive that work. So all I'm suggesting to you is, I'm for process. I know you're for process, but we need a chance to look at the 1,000-page bill.
I've been around here a while. The transportation bill has never been any kind of an issue for us, that we all knew, that we were obliged to maintain the roads. Actually, I represent an area, again, where we are trying to rebuild an economy. People aren't going to come to the United States and set up jobs here if they don't have an infrastructure. We don't have no high-speed rail. Everything else is crumbling. They have put off, I think, for 3 years, the safety for rail. I can't imagine that after all the people who have died and all the damage and the cost that's been, we're going to put that off again? For goodness sakes, but I will tell you, if they can't get goods and people to the market where they need to go, jobs will not come to this country.
Well, I would bet that you'll have an
that is
opportunity.
very sad day
I
for
bet
us.
you'll have an opportunity to just take that Senate bill and put it on the floor tomorrow if that's what you want to do. But we're going to.
I think we're worried here about the Ex-Im Bank. Isn't that our big issue here? It doesn't have anything to do with roads and bridges.
Well, I think it is a roads and bridges issue. That's the bill that'd be coming over.
I think the Ex-Im Bank. is
Okay,
really
well,
the big road.
I think you'll get your chance to
Everybody's
do with it as
stumbling
you want.
over.
We'll find out what you want to do.
You're going to put the Ex-Im Bank on?
I did not say that.
How am I going to get to do what I want to do if I can't vote for it? I'm going to live for another day, we hope. Is that it?
We might live.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if you would yield.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, when you say that there's a 1,000-page bill and that we are not going to take it here, I'm here in my 21st year,
Yes, sir.
and this is the first time that I can remember that we are leaving early for an August recess. what's to stop us? The Senate worked all through the past weekend. What's to stop us from taking the necessary time to do what is necessary to look at the Senate bill? And what's going to happen between now and October that is going to make there be any difference in what it is when we see it? In short, I just saw, for the life of me, I would rather not go home and take the time to go through it. And like you, the stuff that I've seen, I watched some of their proceedings over the weekend. Many of the things that were included are things that I don't think should be in a transportation bill. But it would seem to me that we're grown-ups here, and we've been tracking. I'd like to think that we had staff and members that were tracking exactly what the Senate was doing. And I don't take lightly the fact that it's 1,000 pages, but we are leaving here early, and we could stay if we wanted to, if the majority chose.
Well, if the gentleman would yield, and
Yes.
we're now working off perhaps my time, but you know we're just trying to work through this thing. I think that if we were leaving town in an irresponsible way, meaning we did nothing and it lapsed, I think I'd be fair game to catch a little bit of grief. But I think if we made provisions and really recognized with respect to the Senate, they're trying to work through their process, which has not been done yet. They worked on it. They came and worked over the weekend. They were most diligent about that. They've got any number of amendments, some extraneous, some not, and they're working through it. And I just simply think it is important for this body to be able to digest what they've done when they do it, not to sit there and do it in one day. Now, it is a good question you ask. Well, why don't you stay and get it and then you work with it? Well, maybe I'm not suggesting we're going to. Maybe hold on.
No, okay.
I don't know. But let's see what they produce. Why don't we see what we produce first? See what is produced.
We're gonna produce this short-range thing, which nobody can use to build
Well.
anything in the country, and everybody knows that's
Well,
what we're gonna do.
Well,
The
no, I'm
gentleman
talking about
continues
what the Senate's doing. So I think we ought to give them a chance. If it were sitting out there, we could really pontificate. We could really second-guess each other. But right now, we're simply guessing.
But, Mr. Chairman, do you not agree that, for example, I was managing for the minority, and my friend, Mr. Collins, was managing for the majority.
Did a great job,
on the-
didn't he?
On the RAINS Act.
Yes, sir.
Several times, either my friend, Mr. Collins, or Mr. Roskam, or Mr. Grijalva, who spoke, and myself, all of us talked about certainty. And we talk all the time here about businesses having certainty. Well, a part of those businesses, we talk about it when it comes to taxes, we talk about it when it comes to regulation, and rightly so. But in infrastructure, is it not reasonable to believe that we should have certainty, and that periods like Ms. Slaughter talks about, where they have a short window to do work, now they're going to be precluded from undertakings? There are projects that have begun that will be slowed up. There are projects that may be started that could be undertaken. And I read something very disturbing. It hadn't occurred to me because I go up that corridor often from here to New York or to Boston. And that tunnel in Baltimore was built in 1883. And last year, they had all sorts of soil erosion and other things, and they don't have the certainty or that they're going to have the funds to do what's necessary, particularly in the Eastern Corridor, where nearly 800,000 passengers a day ingress and egress through that system. Never mind about the answer. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
to say
Well,
the word certainty.
Well, we're delighted to have our three guests in front of us, and I think all three of you are mature enough and been up here enough to know that this committee has strong opinions, but we also get a whole bunch of different items that come before us, and we see things several times, and we are concerned about all of them. So we're glad that you're without objection. Anything you have in writing will be entered in the record. I encourage you to please leave for our awesome stenographer. Anything that you bring, it helps her sort it all out and get it all done right. Mr. Chairman, glad that you're here. If you'll please remember, I'd like for you to talk about both sides of the equation. I'll let you divide that out as appropriate. The gentleman, the young chairman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the ranking member, I appreciate you allowing us to testify today. Firstly, about H.R. 1994 as amended, called the VA Accountability Act of 2015, and H.R. 3236, which is the Surface Transportation and Veterans Healthcare Choice Improvement Act, and I will talk about the accountability bill first. It would provide the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs with yet another tool to instill accountability at the VA while allowing him or her to remove or to demote any employee for poor performance or for misconduct. The bill also contains language to protect whistleblowers by stipulating that any employee may not be removed under this new authority if they have an open claim at the Office of Special Counsel until that claim is closed. And to further protect those who courageously have come forth with problems within the department, this bill would also set up a new process to be used in addition to any other process that is currently allowed by law for an employee to blow the whistle at VA by allowing them to bring issues to light up through their chain of command while being protected from retaliation and removal. My bill also makes changes to the Senior Executive Service Performance Evaluation System by limiting the number of SES employees who can be graded in the top 2 performance tiers to 30%. It would limit paid administrative leave for any VA employee within a 1-year time frame to only 14 days. It allows the Secretary to recoup a portion of an SES employee's retirement benefits if they are convicted of a felony that is related to the performance of their job. It extends the probationary period for all new VA employees to 18 months to ensure a complete evaluation before offering permanent status, and it would require that GAO do a study on VA time and space that is being spent on union activities. Now, I agree with everyone here, and it's already been said, that the vast majority of VA's employees are hardworking public servants who are dedicated to providing quality health care and benefits to America's veterans. But unfortunately, when the Secretary comes across the small number of employees who don't meet VA's expectations, as we've seen time and time again across this country in places such as Phoenix, Arizona, Denver, Central Alabama, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and in my home state of Florida, and many other locations nationwide, it's nearly impossible to fire them in a reasonable amount of time. We have seen how the presence of poor performance and misconduct, ranging from unethical practices to outright criminal behavior, can spread like a cancer throughout a workforce. Instead, VA continues, as they have always done, to transfer problem workers, placing them on paid administrative leave, or simply allowing them to go virtually unpunished, because current civil service rules make it nearly impossible to properly hold an employee accountable. This isn't just my view. A recent GAO study found that it can take 6 months to a year, or sometimes significantly longer, to fire poor-performing government employees. Furthermore, last month, Deputy Secretary Gibson sat before the VA committee and admitted it was too difficult to fire substandard VA employees. Now look, I think we should all agree that it defies common sense for it to take many months or even years to fire a poor-performing employee at VA. In my view, bad employees mean bad customer service, and it's time to change the impediment to quality service to our veterans. Veterans and well-deserved performing VA employees deserve better than the status quo. I know there are concerns that this bill will hurt the department's ability to recruit and retain good employees and hurt employee morale. But I don't think this could be further from the truth. The best way to improve morale is to get rid of the causes of the dysfunction that we currently see all over the Department of Veterans Affairs. Nobody enjoys working for an organization that fails to hold poor performers accountable, and the employees VA should want to recruit are those who want to work in an environment where they know everyone is respected and can be held accountable for their actions. Some have also said that this bill is not needed because VA fires employees all the time. But raw numbers don't tell that whole story. Following the year in which we all witnessed the biggest scandal in VA history, only 3, let me say it again, only 3 employees have been successfully fired for wait time manipulation. It is clear that more work needs to be done to turn the tide at VA and change the culture within the department. That's why this legislation is not punitive. But I think it is necessary if we truly want the Secretary to make the changes this Congress, the American people, and most importantly our veterans expect to be made. I know that the unions oppose this, and I want to make it clear that staff has worked with them from the beginning and has reached out to them to find some common ground as to what changes, if any, could be made to get their support. And it's been clear that pretty much anything but the status quo will not garner their support. Well, the status quo isn't working. It's failing the veterans that the VA is supposed to serve, and it's time for a change. The Secretary needs the ability to make real reforms, and he needs to be able to do it quicker than the current average timeline of 6 to 12 months to remove an employee. This bill is necessary, and over 90 bipartisan co-sponsors agree, and over 10 major veteran service organizations agree as well. Furthermore, this is not something that does not have any precedence. It's modeled after the authority provided in the Choice Act to remove SES employees, which passed with broad bipartisan support with a vote of 400 to 5 and was signed into law by the President last summer. We need to continue to push for the same change we pushed for last year. Now's not the time to change our belief in the need for greater accountability within VA. Our veterans still expect us to continue to advocate for them as more and more VA's missteps are brought to light every single day, whether they are on the front page of the paper or not. If we don't at least try to give the Secretary the tools that he or she needs to hold VA employees accountable, then Congress is just as culpable for any future VA failures as the antiquated civil service laws that foster these failures today. Now, I also want to talk, if you will allow me, Mr. Chairman, about the provision in the Surface Transportation and Veteran Health Care Choice Improvement Act, which is critical to ensuring that our nation's veterans can continue receiving care from the VA healthcare system. Only 2 weeks ago, VA announced that the department would be shutting down VA medical facilities all across this country in mid to late August unless Congress granted flexibility to allow VA to access just over $3 billion in the Choice program. That announcement came after a hearing that I called in late June to discuss troubling rumors that the committee was hearing about the state of VA's budget. At that hearing, VA finally admitted that the VA healthcare system was suffering from a $2.5 billion funding shortfall, largely as a result of larger than anticipated demand for non-VA care and increased cost for hepatitis C treatment. Now, prior to the hearing, Secretary McDonald testified 4 times without ever mentioning the possibility of a budget shortfall, and VA submitted a quarterly financial report that showed that VA was actually under budget for the year. Once again, VA has turned the department's mismanagement into a fiscal emergency. And once again, Congress must act to protect the veterans of this country from being harmed by VA's mismanagement and, dare I say, malfeasance. The Surface Transportation and Veterans Health Care Choice Improvement Act would provide the VA with the ability to use $3.348 billion from the Veterans Choice Fund to pay for non-VA care from the 1st of May of 2015 to October 1st of 2015. And of that, VA would be allowed to use $500 million to cover the pharmaceutical expenses from hepatitis C care. This would allow VA the budget flexibility that is needed to make sure that VA hospital doors remain open through the end of this fiscal year. In return, it would require VA to develop a plan to consolidate all of its community care programs under a single umbrella called the Veterans Choice Program. That would be funded through a dedicated appropriations account for non-VA care in each president's budget submitted to Congress beginning in the fiscal year of 2017. VA would be required to deliver this plan to Congress no later than the 1st of November and would serve as the department's initial proposal for legislative and budgetary action in creating the future Veterans Choice Program. Right now, VA has 7 different programs that provide hospital care and medical services to veterans outside of the department's walls. These 7 different programs have 7 different sets of eligibility requirements, reimbursement rates, and business processes that often operate in conflict and sometimes in competition with each other. Our veterans and our taxpayers deserve more than that, but they also deserve more than to wait until November for VA to develop a plan. So in the meantime, the Surface Transportation and Veterans Health Care Act would also make several important changes to the existing choice program. For example, it would eliminate the requirement for a veteran to have been enrolled in the VA healthcare system by August 1st of 2014 in order to be eligible for the program, and expand the number of non-VA providers allowed to participate in the program by including Medicaid providers and other approved providers wherever it's appropriate. It would also allow veterans who live within 40 miles of a VA community-based outpatient clinic that does not have a full-time physician on staff to access primary care through the choice program, and give VA flexibility to allow veterans who need care within the department's 30-day wait time metric to access care through the choice program. Outside of these changes, the bill would prohibit VA from using appropriated dollars to expand internal dialysis capabilities until an independent analysis of the ongoing dialysis program is completed and a 5-year dialysis investment plan has been submitted to Congress. But also amend the Internal Revenue Code by exempting any employee of the health coverage by the Department of Defense or by VA from classification as an eligible employee for purposes of the employer mandate under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act to provide such employees with minimal essential health care coverage. Finally, it would allow a veteran who receives hospital care or medical services for a service-connected disability to participate in or contribute to a tax-preferred health savings account. I really believe that this bill is in the best interest of our veterans, and I thank you for including it in this agenda today. I thank you for giving me the chance to testify, for your dedication for fulfilling our promise to America's veterans, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Let's take it on. I'm going to let you borrow that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. It's going to hit that green button. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Slaughter. I oppose H.R. 1994. We are all frustrated that the VA is not moving fast enough to hold bad employees accountable. I think we all can agree on that. But I do not believe that H.R. 1994 would lead to real, long-term accountability at the VA. In fact, I believe it would have the opposite effect by possibly shielding poor-performing VA employees from ever being removed. This bill violates long-standing Supreme Court precedent. The Constitution gives all federal employees the right to due process of law. In other words, fair notice and a chance to respond before losing their jobs. Now, our veterans do deserve the best, and they deserve the best customer service. But they laid down their lives to defend the Constitution, including the Fifth Amendment and due process rights. As lawmakers, we do not have the power to revoke this constitutional principle of fairness and due process for a select group of people, no matter how outraged we may feel. If H.R. 1994 were enacted, I believe courts could very well overturn any removals and reinstate and give back pay to those who were removed. Bad employees would become permanent fixtures at the VA when they could have just been fired under existing Title V authorities consistent with the Supreme Court's rulings regarding due process. In addition, H.R. 1994 would provide a new tool to VA managers, but perhaps not the tool imagined by its supporters. Bad managers and political appointees would have the ability to threaten the livelihoods of honest VA workers trying to follow VA regulations and policy, thus reinforcing the culture of fear and reluctance to speak out against poor management or malfeasance within the VA. And if these employees were fired, they would have very little opportunity to tell their side of the story. H.R. 1994 would also make VA the only at-will workplace within the federal government. Veterans desperately need our nation's top doctors, nurses, and counselors to choose to work at the VA, and it is already hard enough to recruit them away from the private sector. But by removing basic civil service protections and basic fairness, this policy would make VA an even less desirable place to work. Now keep in mind that over 30% of VA employees are veterans themselves. They deserve better than to find themselves in a workplace that strips them of basic constitutional protections. Again, constitutions that they fought to defend. Now, this bill is nothing more than an attempt to destroy the civil service, using the VA as a test case. It would empower the very individuals who have often perpetuated the worst VA scandals, VA managers, to threaten the livelihood of hardworking frontline VA employees and to silence the voices of whistleblowers we rely on to tell us when something is wrong. Now, for all our frustration with the VA, the continued existence of a nonpartisan civil service, I repeat, nonpartisan civil service, is vital if we are to fix the mess at the VA and provide our veterans with the benefits and services that we have promised them and that they have earned. As the Merit Systems Protection Board has stated in a report from May, quote, due process is available for the whistleblower, the employee who belongs to the wrong political party, the reservist whose periods of military service are inconvenient to the boss, the scapegoat, and the person who has been misjudged based on faulty information. Due process is a constitutional requirement and a small price to pay to ensure that the American people receive a merit-based civil service rather than a corrupt spoils system, end quote. Now, during the Veterans Affairs Committee's consideration of H.R. 1994, I offered an amendment that I believe would provide real accountability in a manner that preserves the important due process rights of our VA employees and protects our veterans. I have submitted this amendment to this committee and urge you to make it in order. Now, last summer, we were all horrified that the VA medical centers in Phoenix and elsewhere manipulated patient wait times. And this spring in Denver, we were frustrated by the huge cost overruns with no real accountability. We agree, VA must do a better job using its current authorities to hold bad employees accountable. My amendment would improve the status quo by allowing VA to immediately fire any VA employee whose misconduct harms veterans. My amendment also caps paid administrative leave at 14 days, so employees will not sit at home and collect a paycheck while fighting a disciplinary action. My amendment shields our bold VA whistleblowers by protecting existing laws and requiring the VA to back pay any whistleblower unjustly fired for reporting wrongdoing. We should not, under the guise of accountability, destroy one of the best tools we have to provide the benefits and services we have promised our veterans, and that tool is a nonpartisan and non-political VA workforce. Now, we need to take steps to protect the vast majority of the high-performing VA workforce from being fired at the whim of capricious or retaliatory managers and political appointees, not make it easier. These employees live in our communities and states. They are our friends, our neighbors, and sometimes our family members. Ensuring basic American notions of fairness is what my amendment provides and what H.R. 1994 frankly does not. I urge members to rule my amendment in order.
Mr. Connell, thank you very much. Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Let me just say, I've been on the committee for 23 years, and our committee has always operated very bipartisan, and I have always appreciated that. In 1994, just the year 1994 was a bad year for Congress. Perhaps none of you all remember that, but I do. And so this bill, 1994, is a non-starter as we speak. I've talked with the Senate, and they're not going to take up this bill. We had a roundtable discussion on it today, and we are working through the issues, and hopefully we can work together to come up with something that's acceptable. But we're getting ready to go home, and we cannot go home and leave the budget, not the authority for the secretary to do what he needs to do to protect the veterans, tied up with this 1994. And let me just say something else. We laid a wreath yesterday at the Arlington Cemetery in honor of our fallen military members. Today, we need to do more than a ceremonial activity. We should honor our veterans now by passing this budget legislation. And I want to say a clean budget legislation. I thought I supported it, but I need to look at it again. But I do know we need a clean budgetary for the secretary. I support this draft legislation because it addresses the $3 billion shortfall for fiscal year 2015 that VA has, and if not, we're going to have hospitals in our area closed and medical facilities open for our veterans through the end of the fiscal year. This legislation allows that the VA to use this $3.348 billion to pay for health care providers to veterans and family members under the program provided by non-VA providers from May 1 to October 1, 2015. Over this fiscal year, the VA has scheduled, and this is a point that you all need to hear, over 7 million more appointments. That's what we asked them to do. And they've seen over 4 million more veterans. Repeat, 7 million more appointments. And they've seen over 4 million more veterans. We believe the secretary needs the authority to run his administration like a business. That's what you Republicans say all the time. We need to run the VA like a business. Give him the authority to run it like a business. The bill allows VA to access $3 billion from the choice funds and $348 million from non-recurring maintenance accounts. Of this amount, $500 million may be used for pharmaceutical expense relating to hepatitis C. Now, who needs that? The Vietnam veterans. It's life and death for them. So, my colleagues, I support, and I don't know, but I support a clean budget bill to give the secretary the authority to run it like a business. Now, let me just say one other thing about transportation, because I've been on that same committee. We know that transportation put people to work. We've had 34 extension, ludicrous. We need a clean, we need to be separated, but we need a long-term transportation bill. We need a long-term transportation bill. I mean, 3 months, they can't plan. Our communities can't plan. And we know for every $1 billion we spend on transportation, it creates 44,000 permanent jobs. Now, the last thing I want to say is the XM Bank. I don't know why we're not taking it up, but we are losing jobs, and they're going to close while we're on holiday or something. Well, I'm not for holiday. I am for work, work, work. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I am available for any questions. But let me be clear. The secretary will shut down these facilities. And he has come to us, this committee, over 3 times, and each time he's indicated that he needed the authority to run it like a business. In other words, to be able to move things from one account to another. With the choice program, for you all who are not on the committee, for the choice program, it covers certain things, but it doesn't cover dentistry. It doesn't cover certain things. And so that because of our success in getting the additional veterans into the system, then they've run out of funds and they've moved around all they can. Now they're coming to a dead end stop. And when we go home, it's no excuse. You can't be talking about what happens to the veterans. This is our watch, and we are responsible for what happens. The Army motto is one team, one fight. Don't think you can separate yourself from the fact that the veterans need these services in the community. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Ms. Brown, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, you had given us what I thought was pretty clear indications about the reasons why the lack of money was there, and you used the term non-VA care. What does that mean?
Non-VA care, there are two different pots of money now. One is the choice funds, and then there's been a baseline budget for non-VA care of approximately $6 billion over the year, and this is the money that the VA has been used to, on fee basis, send veterans outside of the walls of the VA system into the private sector.
So in other words, the money that they are short is based upon the ability to send people outside while these were being fixed.
Part of the problem and what has happened is the Choice Act gives the choice to the veteran.
Yes, sir.
The non-VA care fund was always the VA's decision as whether or not they sent somebody out or not. What VA did when they realized that there was a budget shortfall coming, they began to ask for flexibility as late or as early as February of this year, never telling us that hospitals were going to close their doors. It was, again, just until about 2 weeks ago that we actually got a one-line throwaway sentence, basically in a letter from the secretary that said, if you don't give it to us, we're going to have to close these down. So what they did was they went to the $6 billion pot, which they had the ability to do, and began feeing people out, paying for the hepatitis C outside of the VA system in hopes that they would have enough money to cover through the 30th of September, the end of this fiscal year. It became very apparent to them, obviously within the last couple of weeks, that it weren't going to be able to make ends meet and stretch. And this is why, in this, look, this $3 billion only gets them to the 1st of October, to the next fiscal year. It goes to show you how large the healthcare system is within the VA system.
I want to add one thing, sir.
Hold on just a moment. If you'll allow me just a second.
Yes.
And so this money, this pot, are there other pots that can be drawn from? Is there any other reservoir? They're now down.
They have drawn from every single fund that they could have drawn from. There are, as I said in my comments, 7 different programs. Indian Health Services, the non-VA care, there are, as...
Excuse me, Mr. Takano? All right, excuse me just a moment, please. Are you going to make yourself available? Mr. Takano, this committee would like to have you stay and make yourself available if you're going to give testimony. And I'd like to ask that you do that. If the gentleman does have if a gentleman has circumstances, he needs to talk with this committee, but this committee thought that what we were going to do is have you available, and if the gentleman is having problems, I'd like to hear from the gentleman now.
I'll stay. No,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I completely respect that. Thank you. So you've drawn down the money.
Well, VA has drawn the
Oh,
money.
excuse me. VA has, the money has been drawn down. You're looking at that. You're acutely aware of this.
This is the only fund from which there are reserve dollars available. And the thing that concerns me about it is currently the choice program has a 3-year sunset or when they run out of money. I discussed this with my colleagues on the Budget Committee about trying to make the choice program permanent. We've got some issues that we need to confront with and solve with the Budget Committee in order to make that happen. But we have looked And we cannot find anywhere else where there are dollars that have already been appropriated. This money was appropriated last year. And so by doing what we're doing, it doesn't add to the debt or the deficit as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I want to be clear about one thing. When we passed the choice program, in that program, we told them to handle their accounting system differently. They used to, so maybe it was at the universities, different places. They had to bring it all central. And so they were doing the expenditures, but it wasn't adding up. VA caught it, and they went in and hand calculated it, and they realized that they had a major problem. In the past, it was operated differently, but we, the Congress, made them change the way they did the accounting system. So it's a new system. And so let's give them credit for catching it and bringing it to us. But they found that basically they realized the amount of additional veterans that was using the system, that the money should have been drawn down. So they have that part, we can't hold them guilty for, because we are the ones in the Choice Act that told them to do this additional accounting, a new accounting system. And you know, anytime you're doing something new, there's going to be some problems with that.
Mr. Chairman, I would real quickly, just also to show you how far they look to try to draw down the dollars that were available. And if you look, it goes back to May, I think May 1st. So we're actually going back retroactively because they've gone in and drawn down from their salary lines as well, which is precisely why hospitals and clinics now will be closed on the 20th of August if, in fact, we do not get this fix passed.
Yes, but you're here in support of giving them the money.
Yes.
And what you're also trying to say is what Ms. Brown said, and the head of the VA had asked for the ability to run it like a business, and you've responded in kind by giving them the ability. When I was in the private sector, I still had to follow the law, but if I had an employee that I needed to discipline, or if I needed to work through moving somewhere else, or to, which not many times, to fire for misconduct, then there were laws related to that. You're not suggesting that existing, I know the rules that are in the civil service, but existing federal law that still be available in the marketplace would be followed. This isn't just take them out and fire them,
Absolutely correct.
nor embarrass an employee.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I want to be clear. 1994 is a separate bill from the budget bill. And I wouldn't recommend that we tie it together. And I don't think the chairman is here asking you to. We're just discussing it together.
Yeah, 1994 is a separate
Separate bill.
standalone bill.
And so we just talk, and so let's be clear. Everybody on both sides of the hall here, Democrats, Republicans, and over in the Senate, support giving the secretary the authority to run it like a business. Now, 1994 have problems. I, at this time, do not support it. And nor does, we had a vote on it, and none of the people on my side of the aisle support it. Now, we don't need to, we need to keep it separate. We are talking and we're working through 1994. Whether you will decide to put it on the floor or not is one thing, but do not tie the budget to this, because they are two separate issues. It's bad enough we putting it with transportation.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Cano?
Mr. Chairman, I think, Chairman Miller, I think it's fair to say that the committee in hearing of the $2.5 billion shortfall, I think on a bipartisan basis, we were not appreciating the surprise, but I was comforted by the fact that everybody calmed down, and it seems to be a bipartisan support for this flexibility. And I think what Ranking Member Brown, when she talks about running like a business, I know that the Republican philosophy is usually block grant things, right? Give more discretion to the folks and not silo all this money. We have 7 different, what the VA now calls care in the community, what is also known as VA care. The Secretary has renamed this care in the community because he wants to overcome the resistance of the VA to work with contract care. And I would also say there's a growing bipartisan support for the department to work with non-VA providers, but he doesn't want to say non-VA providers anymore. He wants to call them care in the community. So there is some urgency to getting the the flexibility because hospitals will close, and they've done everything they can to staunch this situation. But again, I also want to reiterate, I think there's two separate issues. We don't want them tied together. The Accountability Act and the budgetary issue, two separate things.
Yes, sir. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the chairman bringing, well, both parts of the veterans bill. I hear from our VA in Decatur, Georgia. It's the big veterans hospital in Atlanta. And the woman who runs that facility, incredibly competent, incredibly caring, does everything she can for veterans in our community. But if she were here today, she would say, Rob, I've got some folks there who are the hardest working public servants you'll ever run into, and I've got some folks there who are totally worthless. And I'm having a tough time getting rid of folks, and so I just put them in the corner of the VA where they can do the least amount of harm, and the rest of us go on with the mission of serving folks. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Chicano, you expressed concerns about the Veterans Accountability Act. You said you were concerned that high-performing VA employees would be subject to capricious political firing. I listened with great interest at the very bipartisan tale you told of the commitment of the committee to our veterans, and I would have said that I find that in every corner of my community, that it does not matter your political stripe, you care about getting the very best quality care to our veterans. Do you believe that a set of circumstances exists where, in the name of political expediency, high-performing, dedicated VA employees would be let go and replaced with less competent, lower-performing VA employees?
Mr. Woodall, I believe that 1994 could lead to such circumstances. It would do away with due process rights, which are co-joined with our history of civil service protections. As you know, we once had government employees under a spoils system in the 19th century, and there were civil service reforms to create a merit-based system, and along with that merit-based system were civil service protections. Government employees are not the same thing as employees in the private sector, and we want to avoid a situation where one political party comes to power and replaces everybody with, but that's not really the immediate, that's something that I think is an eventuality. What I want to point out to you is that under the current due process regime, between July 1st, 2014 and June 30th of this year, 872 permanent VA employees were removed, permanent ones. These are not probationary. 487 more resigned or retired in lieu of being removed. Okay, so that also counts as assertive managerial action. 958 probationary employees were also terminated. So even under the current regime, and my bill does provide some reforms, it does enunciate another standard. It is possible, and it does happen that we have, under the current VA, disciplined employees. Now, that's not to say that more should be done in the cases outlined in the case of Denver and Phoenix. I think we're all frustrated with that. But I think there's a danger of us going too far.
There is a sport in this town that is the kicking of federal employees. I don't want to engage in that sport. There's another committed pastime in this town, and that's ensuring that our veterans get absolutely everything that we promised to them. I guess I feel like the latter is more powerful than the former, and that working together, particularly under Chairman Miller's leadership, that we just wouldn't allow that to happen, that the priority here is not kicking federal employees. The priority here is getting the very best for our veterans, and not that we can't get that done over a period of 12 months, not that we can't get that done over a period of 36 months or 6 years or 10 years, but that folks needn't weight for that we can do better. And even in your legislation, I get the sense that you too believe and know that we can do better.
That's true. I don't believe the two principles you've enunciated are mutually exclusive. I think our veterans have fought for our Constitution, fought for our liberties, and that includes the Fifth Amendment. That includes due process rights. That includes property rights. And I don't think we would be so animated by our outrage, use our outrage to do away with the very things that our veterans fought to defend. On the other hand, we do need managers to do the hard work, the meticulous work of documenting the wrongdoings of employees and doing what's necessary under the current civil service due process regime. And I've just kind of gave you some statistics which show that it is possible and it is being done. We can tweak some more, and my legislation enunciates a new clear and present danger standard, which would allow for the immediate removal of any VA employee who causes harm to a veteran, the health of a veteran or the life of a veteran. And under this standard, we certainly could have fired a person that was responsible in Phoenix.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for what you've done here. Mr. Chairman, I get back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Slaughter? No question. Joam does not seek time. The gentleman from Pilot Point, Texas, the gentleman, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank our witnesses for being here. I'm going to ask you a question I hadn't intended to ask, but you all brought it up, and that is the VA secretary, I assume it was the VA secretary, came to you with a one-line, tersely worded note relatively recently that we're in deep trouble. Is that correct?
Well, it was actually a letter that probably had 5 paragraphs in it, and buried in one of those paragraphs was that one line: if we don't get the flexibility, we will be forced to close hospitals and clinics in August.
I had an opportunity to meet with Secretary McDonald when he was relatively new last fall. He impressed me. He seemed, certainly his competence in Procter & Gamble was pretty straightforward. He seemed compassionate. He seemed knowledgeable. He seemed willing to sit down with me at a meeting very early in his tenure. But now you're giving me information that calls into question his ability to do his job. Is that something that we should be concerned about as we're writing additional checks to his agency?
I will tell you that I believe that Secretary McDonald is the right person. I will tell you, when you have an agency with 350,000 employees, the issues that many of us are confronted with now are issues that have been systemic, as we found out on the wait times. 110 facilities were named by the IG. The Secretary and the Deputy Secretary are, in fact, trying their best. But the bureaucracy, unfortunately, and this is not kicking anybody around, but the bureaucracy is in a protect itself mode. And that's unfortunate, because we're trying to discuss in a bipartisan fashion. And as the members have already said here, we have done that on our committee. I will tell you that we talked about running things like a business. One of the things the Secretary started talking about flexibility about was being able to dip into the choice funds to alleviate the budget shortfall on the Denver, Colorado hospital of almost $1 billion. That was a no-starter from both sides. That's why, obviously, there has to be some controls. The Secretary, I think, would like us just to give him one check and he spend the money how he sees fit. The hospital in Denver, when Congress saw that it was spinning out of control, basically put a cap of $800 million on that facility, and they blew through that cap, and nobody's been held accountable. Nobody has been held accountable.
Has there been a referral to the Department of Justice about what's happening in Denver? Because I got to tell you, we built a huge VA clinic in the southeast part of Fort Worth through the miracle of redistricting. That became part of my district in 2005. We had the groundbreaking to ribbon cutting in less than 5 years' time. It was outsourced, if you will. There was a private developer who built the building, and then a long series of long-term leases were signed by the VA. And that thing was up and running in 5 years' time. Critically important, because the old VA facility in downtown Fort Worth just, I mean, they literally couldn't keep up with the demand. Well, the first time I went down and visited with them, the ophthalmologist and the urologist were using the same chair, not on the same day, but still, you get the idea of how stressed for space they were. And in 5 years' time, this thing was up and running. And then Denver in 2003, and still is not running to this day. I mean, what is the difference? Why is that happening? Why is it being allowed to happen? And as you said, no one's been held accountable. I think that just demands a Department of Justice referral.
Mr. Burgess, we are in fact working with the Department of Justice, but I will also tell you this, and I think the Secretary would back up my comments. A lot of this was absolute pure incompetence. And it's not because this committee had not been raising our voices as loud as we possibly could, because there were issues in Orlando that has finally been opened. There were issues in Las Vegas, and I know there's going to be issues that we're going to have to deal with in the hospital that's under construction in New Orleans right now. We cannot go out and build facilities that cost $1 billion to $2 billion to take care of our veterans. Think of the care that could be done in the community with this $1 billion overrun. And it's in a bipartisan fashion, because VA was telling everybody, yes, we will be able to build it for the budget that you've provided. And then when it became very apparent, and they've come forward and admitted that they thought they were contractually in line, and the courts ruled against them on every single count.
I would like to respond.
The gentleman from Texas, Pilot Point, Texas, controls the
Yeah.
time.
Be happy to have you respond.
Fine. First of all, we had not built any VA hospitals, the Congress, in 8 years. Oh, I'm sorry, or longer. And so when we authorized these 5 hospitals, a lot of the expertise that was needed just didn't exist in the system, and they had a lot of problems. We built our hospital in Orlando, but we were, a team effort, and we worked over that through a period of time. I'm very happy that you was able to build your hospital in 5 years. But that is not
clinic, in fairness.
That is not the story on building these VA hospitals. We're working with different groups like the Army Corps and others that we're bringing in to work to make sure that the VA have the expertise that they need to move forward with large projects. They still need the flexibility to handle clinics and other things. You asked a question about the secretary. Let me just say the secretary is an officer, a gentleman. He does the best he can given the hand we're dealing him to deal with.
Well, I
Now,
think the
from the
same
very
statement could
beginning,
have been said, in all fairness, about General Shinsheki when he was head of the VA, an officer,
I
a gentleman,
and
a war hero in
absolutely.
his own right, but things got out of control.
Absolutely, and let me just say, since you called his name, he did something that we had not done for years. He opened up the system for all of the veterans that had to go one by one to prove the eligibility. He opened it up, but yet we didn't give them the VA, and they didn't ask for the additional resources they need to serve all of the veterans. So it was a major problem. But let's don't talk about his name, because he did something for veterans that no one else's did. He opened up the system so that the Vietnam veterans and other veterans from other wars didn't have to come in one by one
Reclaiming
and prove their case.
My time, I was just pointing out that he was an officer and gentleman and a war hero in his own right.
I agree with you.
Mr. Chairman, let me just ask you, because I mean, we get the frustration from our constituents, and we're going to get it a lot starting next week. The Veterans Choice Act passed about this time last year. I don't recall if there were any dissenting votes when your bill passed. Okay, I stand corrected. But it took so long. By November, we were still getting complaints. I called your committee staff and said, what in the world is going on? And they said, well, we haven't, or the agency has not yet written the rules to be able to allow the veterans to access the funds. Now, I assume that has happened, but even then, there are obstacles that are put. I mean, we're far from having solved the problems that we thought we solved last year, and now we have an additional host of problems that we're trying to solve this year. Very, very difficult to get in front of these things, but we have to do it. But where are we with getting a veteran who feels like, or is the indices are that they're being denied care because of the wait time or the distance traveled? Where are we with getting those veterans the help they need?
I'd rather that the Secretary were here to answer that question, but let me tell you that once the bill was signed into law in the beginning part of August, they basically had until December to get the rules in place, to get the cards and all of the service groups together in order to provide the service to the veterans. So there was some lag time getting it stood up. I will tell you that what I hear from my veterans, and it sounds like you're hearing some of the same things from yours, is that there still is a long way to go as it relates to getting people in a timely fashion. The Secretary will tell you that the average wait time now is 4 days. There's no way that it's 4 days. I don't know how the numbers are being calculated in order to make that comment, but we still have a long way to go. Let me just say that this did not happen overnight. This is decades of culture that we are trying to change, and it is very, very difficult. But the Secretary has told everybody on the committee, if you have one person that we believe is eligible for choice, either because of their mileage or because of their wait time, that we are to get their name and give it directly to the Secretary, because we've accused them of not wanting the choice program to be successful. He says they want it to work in cooperation, and so we are trying to work with him. But when we keep getting hit with $1 billion here, $3 billion there, you become suspect as to how the system works internally.
Let me just, one other observation, if I could. The distance also becomes an issue. I no longer have the part of the district that has the big VA clinic. The VA hospital Dallas is outside my congressional district, so I'm in one county north, so part of my county is outside the 40-mile distance. But other residents of the county, other veterans in the county will suggest that even though there may be, as the crow flies distance, 40 miles or less, if the crow has to get on a freeway that's under construction and the traffic constraints being what they are, this is not something that it in fact is an impediment to them getting their care. Are there ways to get around the 40-mile limit for someone whose distance is significant and the time involved
Dr.
is
Burgess,
different?
thank you for that, too. There was an issue that we have solved as it related to and it was already in the law. If there was a geographical impediment, i.e. somebody lived on one side of the Grand Canyon and the clinic was on the other, and the mileage you had to drive around to get to it, that has been resolved. But if you hear of another issue, I would appreciate you bringing it to my attention.
I bet I will in about a week, and I'll be happy to share that with you. Let me just, one other thing that comes up for someone who is referred outside the VA system under the Veterans Choice Act in my area, that generally means it is a primary care type appointment. If a specialist appointment becomes necessary, then it's back into the system, back down to Dallas, where they've got those time and distance considerations. Is there anything that is being done to address the ability to access specialty care and or hospitalization if it's required?
I think I need to visit with you a little more offline to see exactly what the issue is that you're having to deal with or you're being confronted with, just to see if it is the implementation from that healthcare network or if it's a glitch in the law. I have an idea that it's probably the way it's being implemented.
Well, and I'll just say, I'm fortunate. I have probably fewer problems than I hear other members of Congress talk about. But at the same time, the problems when they come up are real problems, and the veterans obviously deserve our attention and deserve that we think these things through when we implement these programs. One of the things that I find hard to understand is, why in an era of smartphones that a veteran simply cannot find open access on an app on their iPhone and match a veteran with an appointment that day and get them seen right now. And I know there are physicians in the community who would do that, and this has just been the frustration of matching the need with the open access has just been extremely irritating.
I understand, and there are apps like ZocDoc that work very, very well, and there's no reason VA can't move to that type of an application.
What's stopping them?
You have to ask the secretary.
I will look forward to you helping me arrange that. And again, I will say that I met with the secretary last fall. We were both at an AMA annual meeting in Dallas. He was very forthcoming, suggested that we do get together and meet, but obviously we both had a lot of business in front of each of us in our respective jobs. But I will take you at your word and see if I cannot make that happen. Let me just ask you one other question about the language that's before us today. The Section G, the termination of investigations by the Office of Special Counsel, this is Section 2, and then a new Section 715 is added, and under that, Section G is termination of investigations by Office of Special Counsel. Why is it necessary to do that specifically?
The Office of Special Counsel actually asked for that language to help expedite the process. So in working with OSC, they specifically asked that we include that language for their benefit.
And could you speculate as to what would be that benefit to the Office of Special Counsel?
Again,
Is it to clean up their books, or?
To expedite the process.
Okay, I will take you at your word that that is a good thing. Then, did anyone else have anything there? I believe I interrupted the gentlelady from Florida when she was wanting to make an
The
observation.
only point that I want to make is that when we passed the choice program, and when the president signed it and implemented, they set that program up within 2 months. Usually it takes about 2 years to implement a new program. And so they really did it in a record amount of time. I have personally had hearings with both groups that administered the choice program. But one of the problems that the secretary is having is that you mentioned the specialty program or different programs that's available in the community. Well, the VA has always had the authority to go to different programs. However, with the influx of so many additional veterans, they ran out of monies for those programs, and you can only use the choice program for a limited amount of, the appointments that you're talking about. Can't do certain specialty programs. And so the secretary just wants the authority to be able to use the choice program and the regular program. For example, we talked about hepatitis C. I mean, really? Veterans, it went up to over $500 million additional dollars. It's just no choice. They must have the best medicine that's available to them. And so that was part of the issue. He needs the flexibility to move the money around.
And I don't disagree with that. I mean, hepatitis C, the ability to cure hepatitis C is a relatively new phenomenon.
It's a new.
The cost up front is going to be high. The cost down the road is likely to be less, so this is a good thing.
And
We should all-
additional pharmaceuticals are coming online
all
with
rejoice
it. So it'll
that-
be competition, which is the American way.
Yes, but we should all rejoice that an illness that at one time was incurable now is, we don't talk about managing it, we don't talk about controlling it, we're talking about a cure, which is a big deal. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Doctor, back to the OSC, if I could, and talk about the expediting of the process. What OSC was concerned with was folks that would be flooding into their office asking for protection when there was no complaint, that
Okay.
they in fact would be able to rule on or investigate. So it would give them the opportunity to expedite the clearance of those cases. And again, it was to prevent somebody who may in fact have an issue going and asking for whistleblower protection when in fact they were not a whistleblower.
I see, I understand. Thank you, yes, I'm sorry.
I have to say that this provision in 1994 is troubling to me, because I believe it actually puts an extra burden on a potential whistleblower. So under the current civil service regime, there's a due process in place on the front end, which 1994 pretty much eliminates, which only incentivizes anybody who has a story of malfeasance or wants to blow the whistle on something. They're compelled to go to the Office of Special Counsel to submit a claim, really, and thereby preserving some front-end due process rights. The regime set up in 1994 only increases the burden on a whistleblower. And so on this particular point, I mean, the way that the law has, they were trying to tweak it, right under the 1994 scenario, you can be fired pretty much at will on the front end. With the whistleblower protection part says, well, except if you go and lodge a notice with Office of Special Counsel. Well, that's what they were afraid of, a flood of people trying to preserve their rights by going off and doing that. But just now think for a moment, person with a legitimate whistleblower story to tell. What an extra burden that is. They face immediate dismissal, the loss of their livelihood. They are intimidated. What likelihood are we going to get people to step forward to enunciate wrongdoing?
I can intuit that your chairman disagrees with you, but
Dr. Burgess, if I could have just a moment. This bill establishes a front-end protection for the whistleblowers. The idea that we are trying to take rights away, the same due process is in place after this passes as it is today. The same evidentiary requirements are in place today. We actually give whistleblowers more protection because we front load the issue. And that's one of the things that's been a little disheartening about the discussion, is because we are not making employees at will. There still is an evidentiary requirement. There still is a process with which somebody can go through and appeal to the Merit Service Protection Board.
Mr. Chairman, you've been kind with your time. I'm going to yield back.
Yeah, I have no questions.
From Alabama.
Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize Mr. Byrne.
Mr. Takano, let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with the U.S. Supreme Court case from 1976 called Pickering versus Board of Education?
I am not familiar with it. I'm not aware.
Well, it clearly establishes not only a property right in a public employee, but it establishes that property right comes with it a First Amendment right. That was a school system employee, I know you can identify with this, complained to the local school board about a school board action and claimed that he was terminated as a result of making that complaint to the school board. The question was whether he had protected speech under his due process rights. It's a property right he has as a public employee, and the Supreme Court said very clearly he does. So the Supreme Court provides whatever the statute provides. The Supreme Court provides very clear protection, and there are at least 2 circuit court cases that I'm familiar with where the federal courts have said that also applies clearly to whistleblowing. So in addition to the statutory protections, we have constitutional protections recognized both by the U.S. Supreme Court and by circuit courts of appeal, particularly with regard to whistleblowers. And it also includes their rights to participate in any sort of political process outside of work. So there have been case law that provided these protections to public employees for many, many years now, well recognized by the law. And it wouldn't matter what we put in the statute, we can't overturn a constitutional decision by the Supreme Court.
Well, thank you, Mr. Byrne. That's precisely the point I was trying to make in my opening statement, that we believe that 1994 does not comply with Supreme Court case law related to due process. And you're right, whatever we do, we can't.
Well, if it does, let me claim my time back, if it does what you said it does, then it will be struck down, because the courts have been very clear about protecting these private property rights and First Amendment rights, including whistleblower rights and political comment rights by public employees. I don't think that's what the chairman is doing with the bill, but if it was for some reason, the courts would very quickly overturn that part of the statute and say it does not apply in that way, because it can't.
Well, might I
Sure,
respond?
sure.
Well, not only would they overturn it, but the employee in question would be reinstated with back pay. My assertion is, why go down an unconstitutional path? Our evaluation of 1994 is it does violate both the front end and the back end due process. It's inadequate, and that likely be thrown out of courts. And it's not really a tool the VA can use. And if they were to use it, it would result in further inefficiency. We believe that the standard I propose in my substitute does meet that.
Well, go back and look at Pickering and the cases under Pickering, and I think you will find that if you compare those to the wording that the chairman's put into the bill, that the chairman's wording does in fact comply both with the Pickering decision and the circuit court decisions underneath that with regard to both whistleblowing and
The case law we're
applicability.
citing is under a case Loudermill, a federal case Loudermill, and we think that 1994 is not in compliance.
Well, would you provide that to me?
We will.
Okay, I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, please respond.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. I would also say that this language is modeled almost identically to that was in the bill that passed last August that dealt with 430 SES employees. And it wasn't just a bill that the House passed, it was a bill that the Senate passed as well, and the President of the United States signed into law. So
By huge margins.
if in fact, if there was a constitutionality question, I believe it would have been brought up at that point.
Been heard by now. Mr. Chairman, go ahead, Mr. Takano.
Well, if I could, the standard that we enunciate, the clear and present danger standard.
Excuse me, with the gentleman speaking to the microphone.
Okay.
He understands you cannot
Okay.
turn and look at him, but if the gentleman.
Okay, it comes from a case where the Supreme Court held that when a state must act quickly or where it would be impractical to provide pre-deprivation process, a post-deprivation process satisfies the requirement of due process clause. In Gilbert v. Homar, a police officer's arrest and charges for running a drug ring provided adequate evidence of misconduct that would, under other circumstances, be determined in a pre-suspension hearing. So his due process rights were not violated when he was suspended without advance notice. This standard, in my amendment, reflects current Department of Defense policy that allows an employee to be fired without pay if he or she presents a clear and present danger to the national security. The courts have upheld the lack of pre-termination process in this case. So what I'm trying to tell you is that we don't believe that 1994 satisfies both those front end and back end.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into a legal argument with you, but I think that case is not on all fours with what we've got here. So I would disagree that is a case that we would reason from to get to this. But let me move on to another topic, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you will remember last year, you came good enough to do a town hall with me in Mobile, and one of the physicians at our outpatient clinic walked with you and me and described to you and me a problem at the hospital, VA hospital in Biloxi, that it was so bad in the surgery over there that he would not refer people to the Biloxi hospital. After that, I contacted the Biloxi hospital and I asked the physician in charge of the surgical operations over there to come and meet with me because I wanted to hear what he had to say. He came to see me and I told him, I said, I don't necessarily believe everything I hear. I want to give you every opportunity to tell me what I need to hear. He said, Congressman, I have some bad news for you. We have shut down the surgical operations at the VA hospital in Biloxi. And I said, why'd you do that? He said, because we had higher than acceptable mortality rates. I said, put that down into plain old English. He says, we are killing people on the operating table. So the reason why I feel so strongly about the Veterans Choice Act is that I have some very fine hospitals and wonderful surgeons in Mobile. And to send my veterans over to Biloxi, where they're dying on an operating table because their surgeons were incompetent, is hard to take. So I appreciate the fact that you're trying to save this budget problem with the VA, but it looks to me like it's a budget problem they created. And now they want to take money from the Veterans Choice Bill, which is providing some glimmer of hope for people in my district and districts all around the country to solve their management problem. And I know that you've worked very hard on this, and God knows we owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude for all you've done on this issue. But how do I feel better about that?
The good thing about the choice program is that it in fact does give the veteran the choice, if he qualifies, as to where he gets his health care, when he gets his health care. Not every system within the VA system is confronted with some of the issues that you talk about in the Gulf Coast Healthcare Network. Remember, my veterans go to Biloxi as well. 80% of the census in that hospital comes from the 1st Congressional District. They have to drive through your district to get to that facility. That's why a lot of us think that choice needs to be expanded. But I will tell you this, as the Congress continues to work in trying to find ways to force the VA to change their culture, ultimately the end goal is quality health care for the veterans, whether it's inside the system or out.
Well, Mr. Chair, go ahead, Mr. Takano.
I'm not familiar with what's gone on in Biloxi, and I'm deeply sorry that if any veterans had to suffer due to inadequate medical services. But what I can tell you from the hearing that we just had, a lot of what's driven the costs up is the influx, as Ms. Brown said, of new enrollees. The rate of enrollment in the VA is high. Higher than it's been in the past at a faster rate. We can have a dispute about whether it's because they think there's better care, but I believe it's due to a rational decision they're making. If they qualify both for Medicare and the VA, they have significantly less copays at the VA. I mean, if you go and get your Hep C at Medicare, you're going to pay a significant copay, or if you're getting a knee replacement under Medicare, no copay at the VA. So they've seen a rapid increase in costs. The centralization of the billing, taken away from the regional centers, obscured the rate at which they were, they knew the authorizations were up, but they weren't seeing the spending side, the payouts, and that was part of the accounting problem that they had because of new centralization. So I'm willing to give them a little benefit of the doubt here that circumstantially, they were trying to comply with our new centralized billing procedure under the Choice Act. So the good news is that more and more veterans are being served. More money has been going out under non-VA care, or what they call care in the community. So there's been more options outside the VA, and essentially this flexibility is going to allow more of that to happen.
Well, reclaiming my time, and I'll end with this. It's just not acceptable that the only option for my folks is that they go to a surgical unit that was closed down for incompetence. And I strongly supported that Veterans Choice Act because I wanted my veterans to stay in Mobile, go to their local hospital, local doctor, people that know them, people that care about them, and get the care they need as and when they need it. And the Veterans Administration has played a game with that program about how they interpret certain things. I have a bill to try to correct that. But they have lost a lot of confidence with me and my people. I've been to a town hall meeting sponsored by my local VA, and I've been in public life for over 20 years. I've never been in a situation like that. Those people were furious, and they had every right to be, because they served their country, they deserved the health care, and it turns out they're just not getting it. And
Would the
I think,
gentleman yield?
no, sir, I'm still talking.
I said, when you finish with.
Yes, sir, when I'm finished, I'm going to quit now, Judge. All I can say is this. From what I have seen, we don't need to have a government-run healthcare system for our veterans. We need to transition out of it and give all of our veterans a card, just like an insurance card, so they can go get their health care from wherever they can get it, however they can get it, in a way that makes sense for them as they make their own decisions, and not be forced into a system that seems, even after a year, after all the stuff we've done, to continue to fail them. And I am finished now.
I would ask my colleague, what's,
Excuse just a moment. The gentleman yields back his time. Does the gentleman seek time?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Then the gentleman's right.
I was going to ask Mr. Byrne a question, and that would be, what, if anything, would you do, recognizing that there is this shortfall and that the flexibility that's being sought would utilize funds from the Choice Act. You're opposed to that flexibility in this particular instance? And if so, what would you do? For example, I would be willing to do everything I can to replenish the Choice Act. But now there's an immediate problem. And so what do we do about the immediate problem?
Well, Judge, it may be too late to do this, but if this agency was organized and managed appropriately and was operating effectively and efficiently, I don't think we'd be having this funding problem. This is a massive government agency. It is too big. It is not responsive. And so they create this problem, then they come running to us and say, give us some more money and take it away from the Veterans Choice Program that we set up. We all did. It was a huge vote for it, to try to give them some options that they didn't have before. And it disturbs me that they can basically commit management malpractice over there at VA and then turn around and take the money from the veterans so they can have their own options. That's just the way I feel about it.
I hear you. I wonder if you're thinking about what our future looks like in healthcare delivery when you make what to me is a cavalier statement about VA should be, in paraphrasing your words, not using your words, but that the VA system should vanish and we should give veterans a card and let them go the way. Are you aware that there's a shortage of physicians in this country? There's a shortage of nurses in this country, and I'm not talking about at VA. Then how would the healthcare system handle what I believe the Veterans Administration is designed to handle, whether it's doing it competently or incompetently at this point?
I've visited every hospital in my district and said, if we did this, could you handle the influx of veterans? And to a clinic, to a hospital, to a medical practice, they said, absolutely.
I see. Mr. Chairman, I think now his having yield, I believe I'm next in line for a question. And
I was acknowledging gentleman's recognized.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. Firstly, Mr. Chairman, I want to be very supportive of Mr. Takano's amendment that he seeks, and also the provision that my classmate and dear friend, Ms. Brown, pointed out that we have a clean veterans budget bill. And perhaps, Ms. Brown, you would be good enough to elucidate further what it is that you're seeking in that regard and how, if any, we might be able to achieve that.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear, because I heard something very disturbing in this room. And I want to be clear that all of the veteran organizations support a VA system, period. No one in this room is talking about doing away with VA. Now, what we're asking for is the secretary to have the flexibility really to expand choice. So you don't have the services, it's limited what they can use the choice program for. We set it up that way. So we set it up that you can go there for additional appointments. But some people need surgical care, and we've always had the community care. So we're talking about expanding the program. We're not talking about limiting how you can use choice.
All right.
And so I want to be clear with that. I am supporting, and I'm not supporting, first of all, 1994, nor are the Democrats in the House or the Senate. What we're asking for is a clean bill. And I support Mr. Miller's clean budgetary authority to give to the secretary, who have come to us numerous times asking for the authority because of the additional 6 million appointments that we demand that they take care of, and the 4 million veterans that we've served.
All right. Let me ask you, Mr. Miller, normally when chairs of a committee, and let me digress and thank you and Ms. Brown and Mr. Takano, and especially you and Ms. Brown, who I know have diligently pursued the work, and I'm proud that both of you as Floridians are exemplars of what bipartisanship can show. And I know for a fact on many other issues, you and she and other members of the Veterans Committee have been aligned together, and I compliment you for that. But a lot of times when chairs of committees come here, we put the question to them, what kind of rule would they have us go forward under? And many times the answer is, well, that's the prerogative of the Rules Committee. I'm curious, your letter dated today's date to Chairman Sessions asks for a closed rule. While that's not necessarily uncustomary, why in this instance did you ask for a closed rule and in this measure, as important as it is?
I think part of the reason, to my colleague from Florida, is because of the time limit that exists out there today, is to be able to move the process through. You know, interestingly enough, as I understand it, this Congress has actually been more open than almost any other Congress in the last 15 years. You may know of one that's been more open than this one, but again, it was from a time perspective that we asked.
And I respect that, and that's exactly what I thought, because Chairman Schuster, who will be up here, I guess, soon, also is asking for a closed rule, and I gather it's this time consideration that I don't care for. And for your information, in my considered judgment, as pertains to open rules, of both the majority and the minority, in the 15 years that you're talking about and the 22 years that I'm here, all 23, have been terribly off mark when it comes to openness. And no, this has not been the most open of the Congresses. As a matter of fact, we talk about it up here all the time, the number of closed rules, new methodologies that are being employed with the gang-up measures where more than one thing is put into a measure, which can be confusing, I think, to the population. Let me go to another question very quickly. First, I'd ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to offer into the record the statement from the National Nurses United, if the chair will allow.
Without objection.
All right. Additionally, I ask unanimous consent that a very important, that one being extremely important, I might add, 185,000 strong, their representatives represent that they are opposed to 1994, and an organization that many of us are affiliated with, and a lot of particulars in our respective constituencies, the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO, 670,000 strong. I'd ask unanimous consent to include in the record their statement in opposition to 1994, Mr. Chairman. Drawing from that, from the AFEG, Chairman Miller, I would ask you to respond to an attachment that they have where, in a side-by-side, they talk about the rights of VA employee facing termination. They say current law allows for 30 days advance written notice. Under your bill, and they refer to it as the Miller Bill, there's no advance notice. They cite for performance-based terminations right to notice of specific instances of unacceptable performance. Under current law, yes. Under your measure, no. Something very critical in my judgment when it comes to firing people, or rights of VA employee facing termination, right to representation. They say on the current law that exists, and under your bill that it does not. 7 days to respond orally and in writing, furnish affidavits and other evidence. On the current law, they claim they can, and under your provision, they claim they cannot. The agency's final written decision and specific reasons at earliest practicable date, they say current law allows for it, your measure does not. right to review of termination. Theirs, by an administrative judge, says current law allows yes. In your measure, they say only if MSPB acts within 45 days. And right to appeal an administrative judge's decision to full MSPB, under current law, they say yes, and under your bill, they say no. So Chairman Miller, can you see how if your measure becomes law, it will have an impact not only on VA or civil service employees, but opens the door for other civil service employees? For example, your measure addresses police, housekeepers, veteran service representatives, rating specialists, cemetery caretakers, custodians, boilerplate operators, medical equipment repair personnel, claims assistants, and patient assistants, just to mention a few. And under the Title VIII, new people that would be included: physicians, dentists, registered nurses, and physician assistants. Let me end by saying this and allow that you respond, Mr. Chairman. The complaints that all of us receive, and we all receive them, all of us have veterans. All of us have either community facilities where veterans are served, or major hospitals where veterans are served. And that depends upon where we are in the country. But in the years that I'm here, the complaints that I've heard about the Veterans Administration has come to my office by people who in many respects would be best described as whistleblowers, who in many respects are very afraid to bring that information and trust in our confidence. And I can think of numerous, if you need it for me to provide them, the anecdotal information where we've received these complaints, protected that employee, gave them advice. How does this measure comport with, and my friend from Alabama mentioned the Supreme Court decisions. My understanding is that the Supreme Court has long held that federal employees must be given due process before losing their jobs. So do you feel that 1994 impacts due process of employees that are veterans, and how, if at all, do you envision that it will impact the rest of the federal civil service program in our country?
I thank you very much, and I think I've already said that due process is preserved. I would also, there's another employee that you did not include in the list. And you know, I would appreciate it had AFGE provided me that side-by-side information to work off of.
They did not, you're saying?
No, they have not,
understand.
that I'm aware of. But it would also include the employee in Central Alabama that drove a patient to a crack house and hired that patient a prostitute, and it took 1 year to fire that employee. So, you know, there can be anecdotal evidence all throughout. I would also like to add that this bill has more than 90 sponsors, bipartisan. It is supported by the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign War, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, Paralyzed Vets of America, Vietnam Vets of America. Over 10 of the major veteran service organizations support this, and I don't think that they would support it if they felt that we were doing anything as it relates to due process. Remember, Mr. Hastings, when we passed the Choice Act and we dealt with the senior executive service individuals, the department went from 30 days to 5 days on their notification. I don't think they need to notify them at all. I think when you get fired, you get fired. But it's based on a 5-day process at this point.
Ms. Brown?
Yes, I just want to be clear about the closed rule, that the questions that you asked, or what is a clean bill. And I want to be clear, it doesn't include 1994, and I would prefer it didn't include transportation, but I think that is a decision that's been made higher up, because I think that transportation, I think that budgetary bill needs to be able to stand on its own. We got bipartisan support, and we need to move this forward or else we're gonna have a major crisis in our communities.
All right, Mr. Takano, you have the last word.
Judge Hastings, let me just say that the example that was cited, the year-long effort it took to fire that employee associated with a crack house and a prostitute, that under my substitute, that situation would have been covered under the clear and present danger to the veterans standard, no doubt about it. But my bill does not take away the front end or the back end standard civil service protections that are constitutionally required as per the case law from the Supreme Court.
Well, I certainly hope we make your amendment in order. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. I'd like to remind the committee that I am aware, Mr. Slaughter's aware, that we're on votes on the floor. I'd like the committee to be aware of that. Gentleman, does the gentleman seek time from Colorado? Getting ready to go. I'm sorry? The gentleman's recognized.
Okay, thank you. I was actually hoping Mr. Byrne would still be in the room because I wanted to reference something he said. And this isn't information I expect maybe you do have right now, but I was going to request from the committee is if we ever taken the, we ever figured out kind of how much we spend per eligible veteran at the VA, kind of take the number of veterans eligible and divided it by the total cost of the VA to figure out what that fully loaded cost is?
Interestingly enough, and I'm not saying this to make light of the current situation, the VA cannot tell you how much it costs for a patient to be seen by one of their physicians. It's called an RVU. And interestingly enough, we have asked them time and time again for that. They do not know how much it costs. I mean, you can't go through and just divide it by the number of veterans. But, you know, for a patient to be seen for a cardiac or an arthroscopic, they can't tell you how much it costs.
They can't break it down.
They cannot.
Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I want to respond to that because we said we have additional 6 million appointments and 4 million veterans. But you have to keep in mind that if a veteran come to you, depending on the age, let's say the Vietnam, they're going to have a multiplicity of things that's wrong. Sure. So it's not going to be just one thing. When you see the patient, and one of the things I personally went to my VA facility, okay, what happens when a veteran come in? Well, when I go to the podiatrist, he checks whatever I'm going for. But when you go to the VA, they got a list of things they check for because we're interested in long-term care. For example, we are interested in making sure your high blood pressure, your sugar. I mean, so it's just not one thing when they go to the veteran. And with an older population that's coming to the VA, you're going to have a list of things that's wrong. And so keep it in mind, we have not adequately funded the VA. This has been a long-term problem that we have underfunded VA, whether it's VA services or construction. And so I am so happy that we're all on the same page and we all understand the importance of funding the veteran because they've already paid their dues. We need to pony up.
Yeah, and I by the way, I agree that, you know, this kind of measure won't be good for employee morale, and I don't think it's as stewards of an organization, it's healthy. Where I think Mr. Byrne had a good point is, I don't know why we're forcing the men and women who've served our country with great bravery to go to a government-run institution that by all accounts is inferior to the insurance you and I have. It seems to me we ought to be providing, as Mr. Byrne said, with some kind of card that gets them the very best care. Mr. Takano?
I don't want to defend any part or any VA facility that has performed egregiously, but what we do know is that, as Ms. Brown said, virtually every VSO is in favor of keeping the VA. And Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to invoke your name inappropriately, but I've heard you say in meetings several times that you are not looking to privatize the VA.
Well, you know, I think obviously we need to buy in from veterans. The whole goal will be to do something veterans want more, but maybe they just need to see what the alternative is.
Well, Mr. Polis,
they deserve the very best care.
What I can say is I think that members on both sides of the aisle, I think there's some consensus that that we want to work with private sector medicine. The Choice Act was a move in that direction. The question is the balance. There are certain things that the VA and that the private sector probably just won't really fund on its own. But I think there is an openness on both sides to discuss where that happy medium might be.
I'm happy to go to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Polis. I would say that what this bill does is it puts VA on a path to make choice permanent. What's most important is for the veteran to make that decision. In the past, it's always been VA's decision as to whether or not the veteran went to outside care. It requires a plan by the 1st of November, and it would consolidate all non-VA care programs. It would fence off in the budget in the appropriations account beginning of 2017. Again, give the veteran the choice, because I do believe that that is the future. Veterans should not be forced to go to a VA clinic for a flu shot. They should not be forced to go to the VA clinic for minor issues. They do very well on catastrophic injuries, and we all know that. But I think healthcare is changing all around this country, and VA needs to change with it.
And as you know, in Colorado, we have our particular frustration with the enormous cost overruns on the yet-to-be-completed facility. So there's a very high degree of frustration among our veterans community. I know that both sides have been working diligently to try to resolve that on behalf of our veterans, and I appreciate that, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Georgia seek recognition. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. And as a member who still serves in the Air Force, this is a concerning thing. I just want to make, for me, this just highlights. There's a lot of been discussion. I'm not going to rehash old ground. Just Washington Post this past week, issue down at the VA in Augusta, which Johnny Isaacson, who's chair in the Senate, and I have been there. Chairman Miller and I have talked about this before. This highlights what most people in America don't understand about being able to fire employees or get rid of employees who are not working. Mr. Henderson, who just was indicted, 50 counts. I'm criminal defense lawyer. He's been indicted, not convicted, but indicted. In the article, it actually says this. He was not a clinician. He was in charge of making outside payments to doctors. Part of his duties included handling managed consults when he just told them to do away with the consults to clear the books. And this is what happened. He was transferred to an administrative job in VA's Atlanta office last year, quote, because he needed a new environment, his lawyer said. No, he needed to find another job. This is the problem of just moving around folks who have been indicted now, who have kept this care and not kept their promise to the American veterans. That's the problem we're seeing here. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who seeks time? I've been an employee for a number of years too and been around a lot of them. And I found when a team could effectively deal with a bad employee, everybody got better. And it's my hope that what you brought to us today, Mr. Chairman, was an opportunity where the people who run the Veterans Administration are given their own authority and responsibility that they're asking for, and I think this is a good thing. I want to thank each of you for taking time to be here. If you'll please leave whatever you've got in writing for our awesome stenographer. I appreciate you very much, and thank you. Let's see, is there anyone else who seeks time on H.R. 1994? Any members that seek time on 1994? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 1994. I'd like to now call up the first panel on H.R. 3236. The gentleman, you guys have done your time in the barrel. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. No, and I do thank you. Yes, sir. You're doing great. This committee now would have the chairman of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, the very popular and ever-loving Bill Schuster. And if the gentleman could come on in and take a seat there. I know he's got lots of fans and lots of well-wishers that are around here. Hundreds of young women in the hall wanting his attention. Mr. Chairman, we're delighted that you're here, and we know you have an important message for us also. Anything you have in writing will be into the record without objection, and the gentleman is now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Sessions and Ranking Member Slaughter. Appreciate the opportunity to be here before you to talk about, and for your consideration of H.R. 3236, the Surface Transportation and Veterans Health Care Choice Improvement Act of 2015. This bill extends the federal surface transportation programs through October 29th, 2015. H.R. 3236 is a clean extension and funds the programs at authorized levels for fiscal year 2014. The bill also ensures the solvency of the Highway Trust Fund. If Congress fails to act, the states will not be able to be reimbursed for past expenses. Transportation projects and jobs across the country will be at risk. Over 4,000 Department of Transportation personnel will be furloughed. My ultimate goal, as the committee's ultimate goal, remains the completion of a long-term highway bill as soon as possible, and we'll continue. We've been working on it for 6 months. We've got a lot of it put together, but we're going to continue to work, and this 3-month extension is necessary. I will say the Senate's action moving a bill over there, although I don't agree with much of it or significant parts of it, it's a positive step. So the Senate can get a bill, but the House voice needs to be heard. And I would encourage all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, this is not just about a transportation bill. This is about protecting the institution, making sure that 435 of us that are duly elected to represent our districts are heard on a bill that's a 6-year bill, potentially a 6-year bill, that's important to all 50 states and all 435 congressional districts. So I'd encourage members on both sides to make this vote to make sure we protect this institution. This 3-month extension represents a compromise that allows the House to move, the House to have more time to confirm our commitments in completing a long-term bill. Continue to work with Chairman Ryan and the Ways and Means Committee to find the dollars we need, the amount of dollars we need to get a long-term bill, 6-year bill. And also with Ranking Member DeFazio, we're working very closely on making sure that both sides of the aisle can vote for a bill as when we bring it to the floor to improve our bridges and our infrastructure. And I think that H.R. 3236 gives that opportunity to just do that. So I thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to say that I'm really thankful that you have had a chance to send a number of not only clear signals, but really back that up with legislation that I believe makes a difference. I am not for leaving town to leave somebody high and dry, and I don't believe that's what you're trying to do. I think you're trying to make sure that adequate funding, though it's not long-term, would be available, that we would be able to leave here in good conscience. Right now, we don't know what the Senate's going to do, or at least as of the time we went in here, and I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I would, however, press you and push you to understand I'm for a long-term bill. I don't believe we should leave before we get our job done, but I think that what the Senate's doing is going through their process. We ought to admire them. We should respect them in their processes, see what that yields, but that doesn't mean we have to take it or leave a 1,000-page bill. It means we need to come back, give you time to go over the bill and with all the members. The VA, which was the hearing just before you were here, very controversial. Every single member's involved. Well, so is every single member with Bill Schuster on this transportation bill. So I want to thank you for your time and effort that you give to each of us to meticulously work through the things that are important to each of us. And I will give you that time, I believe, with this bill, and I believe you deserve it, and I'm very, very appreciative of what you're doing.
Thank you.
Mr. Woodall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I served with Chairman Schuster on the Transportation Committee, and it always pains me to see him sitting generally alone in that chair as we do these extensions. If this committee saw fit to give the Transportation Committee the ability to fund transportation projects, not just authorize transportation projects, I have no doubt that the chairman would have come to a solution. But we have to wait on others to do that too. And I know the chairman's doing absolutely everything he can to do that. I hope as folks are visiting with you today, Mr. Chairman, they will deal with that sensitively, that, again, if there are things here the Transportation Committee cannot solve, and yet it is your duty to come here and keep things afloat while we wait on the entire team of people to get together and solve things. I thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Slaughter?
Yes. Mr. Schuster and I've had great meetings of the minds as I do with his father.
Just
I
in the
know
elevator
what
today.
he wants to do, right? He wants to build things.
Yep.
I like that very much. But I honestly cannot help but say that it has to be an embarrassment that the Congress of the United States extends this thing 34 times, that 2 houses of the Congress cannot get together and do the highway bill. I mean, that seems to be, to me, sensibly would be the easiest thing in the world that we ever had to do, was to maintain the infrastructure of the United States, and we just simply can't do it. And I just want to say that whatever the reason, it's embarrassing, I think, and I'm sorry. That, once again, was it 34 times it's been extended?
I believe that's the number.
That's got to be probably a planetary record, I would think. But, Mr. Schuster, thank you for your work.
Well,
And I never go by Mr. Schuster without telling him how badly we need some work on the rail up here where I live, and he's always very accommodating, man. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I just agree that, 34 times probably is a record. But if you look back at the history of the transportation bills, I don't think there's ever been one done on time, and that was the first one back in the 50s. We might have had one other in there, but so it's always been a challenge, but something we were able to overcome. And I think just say to my Democratic colleagues, this is not a fix, the long-term solution. This is let's get a long-term bill. But my commitment is right after it's done, we all have to sit down, the stakeholders, members on both sides of the aisle, and say, what are we willing to do? We've got to come together and say, this is how we should move forward to fund it
I don't think we've got any expectation of that. I seriously don't. If you have to extend it 34 times, I don't know what miraculous thing we would come back from being in the district where everybody's mad at us for not being able to do work, particularly where you and I come from, the part of the country where there's a very short season for us to do construction. And then suddenly we will all see the light and sit down and do it. Good luck to us all. Let's say that. Let's hope that no disasters befall us. But one thing, do you agree with the notion that we should postpone for 3 years the Budgetary systems in the Northeast?
Well, I think we have to do something to address that because the technology is just not there to roll it out yet. And there needs to be.
I understand it works very well.
Well, you're talking about Budgetary for the Northeast Corridor?
Yeah.
No, they have theirs. Theirs is in place. And in the Northeast Corridor, the difference is they're all running on the same track. The problem with the freight rails across the country is they're interchanging different locomotives and cars and all over this country. So it's a much bigger job than on a track that's dedicated.
But I understand that the terrible accident we just had outside Philadelphia could have been avoided had we had that. But we really
That's
need to
true,
look at
but they had a system on the train that they could have turned on, but they didn't feel was necessary because that curve is such a deadly curve. But and we still haven't got to the bottom of it. Why did it happen? It doesn't appear to be the equipment, though.
When 750,000 Americans a day ride that train, we ought to make sure that best we can can make it safe. And I know Mr. Hastings brought up a while ago the article in the New York Times yesterday about that awful tunnel in Maryland that was built in the 1800s and holds up railroads considerably. Sure. I mean, have mercy on us and let's get a bill here so we can start to look like the great country that we are.
Thank you. Does that count? That means you're going to vote for the extension?
I'm going to puzzle over it.
Okay.
All right.
Anything I can do to help convince you, I'm happy.
I appreciate it, but my experience actually in the years I've been in Congress is the best thing in the world we could do is the highway bill, the construction bill. And we've had some extraordinary leadership to be able to do that, and you are among them, Mr. Schuster.
Thank you.
Mr. McGovern?
I just will concur with what the gentlelady from New York has said. I'd make a suggestion. One of the things that helped get the highway bill passed when your dad was the chairman of the committee was we had earmarks. And everybody had some skin in the game. I think it's too easy for people to look at all this as very abstract, and it might help some of your members get on board with some pay-fors in the process. You could actually prove that in your own district that something's got to happen. So anyway, I appreciate what you're trying to do. It is frustrating, and I tell you the patience, not only in my state, but I think states all across the country with Congress's inability to do its job on this is really quite strong. So in any event, thank you for being here. Yeah.
Mr. Polis?
I just could, like I said, Mr. Governor, I was just up in Massachusetts. I spent some time with the newly elected or relatively newly elected Republican governor of Massachusetts, and then I went to Connecticut, Democratic governor of Connecticut. They both said exactly the same thing to me when I said, well, how can we help? They said, do a long-term bill and give us more flexibility to get these jobs done faster. So that's both sides of the aisle in the states. So.
Thank you very much. Does any Republican seek time with the young chairman? Mr. Schuster, thank you very much.
Thank you.
much was said about you before you got here, and most of it was
Hope some of it was
favorable, but
good.
when you showed up, we were nice.
Okay.
So I appreciate it.
Well,
Bill,
it's
thank
beneficial.
you for taking, I know you spent a good bit of your afternoon to be here, and I'm sorry.
Nope, it's fine.
Delightful. Thank
Thanks
you
for the
very much.
opportunity.
We saw Mr. Fincher, who was here earlier, and I don't know whether he still has a staff member here to notify him. Perhaps that'd be a good thing if we did. Mr. Hecht, I know perhaps you're here representing him, I'm not sure, but if the gentleman is here to seek time, the gentleman may please come up and take a desk, and looks like you don't have any paper on you, so the gentleman's recognized. Oh, there it is. Like to ask that anything you have in writing that you leave for our awesome stenographer so that she can make sure the record's very clear. Gentleman's recognized.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Gentleman's
Chair.
recognized.
Thank you. I am in fact here to support Mr. Fincher, who had indicated that he was returning, and I don't know what your protocol or plan is.
Well, the protocol is I had understood you wanted to speak on,
In support of Mr. Fincher.
okay, well, if you want to speak in support of Mr. Fincher, I believe he is here to speak on this bill that might be called the Surface Transportation Veterans Choice Act, Health Improvement Act of 2015, which is a funding bill.
He asked your approval of a rule that would enable him to offer an amendment that would reauthorize the Export-Import Bank.
Okay.
It is Mr. Fincher's amendment, and I am in support of his request in that regard for three reasons. First of all, it's the will of the Congress. Secondly, the Export-Import Bank does good things. Thirdly, if we don't do it, bad things are going to happen. It's the will of the body in the House fairly clearly, because on the Democratic side, there are, count them, 190 co-sponsors of a reauthorization. And Mr. Fincher himself has a bill with 62 co-sponsors, not that significantly different from the Democratic version. You add those two numbers together, and it's a supermajority, and it doesn't even include the probably 40 to 60 additional members who would vote yes. And as we have all seen, it's also the will of the U.S. Senate, which has now voted, count them 3 times with supermajority votes in support. It is the will of the United States Congress, both chambers, and what we're asking for is a vote. The XM does good things. It reduces the deficit. It supports jobs. In the last 20 years, some $6 billion has been transferred to the U.S. Treasury from surplus funds at the Export-Import Bank. Not one penny, not one red cent of general taxpayer dollars in the last generation has supported the XM. The opposite is true. It reduces our deficit. It supports jobs. In the last calendar year, by best estimate, 164,000. If we do not reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, it is unilateral disarmament. We will be the only advanced economy on the face of the planet without an export credit authority. The only one. Bad things will happen if we don't get to this. Bad things will happen. It will start first with small businesses. Last calendar year, some 3,000 small businesses received support from the Export-Import Bank, either in the form of revolving line of credit or accounts receivable insurance. Small businesses like Manhasset Specialties in Yakima, Washington, which makes music stands and has grown its export business to 35% of its total. Pexco makes traffic cones and traffic signal equipment in Fife, Washington. Both of these businesses are small, and they will begin to feel the effect immediately. I want to be very careful about how I say what I'm about to say, but I do want you to know I'm speaking from my heart, and I think quite responsibly. If we do not reauthorize the Export-Import Bank before we leave on the August break, then there will be 2 major manufacturers in this country that make announcements about moving production offshore. They will be forced to, because we will have rendered them less competitive in an increasingly competitive global environment. So I ask you to support Mr. Fincher, who I think has joined us now in his request, and would be glad to defer. I'm just his wingman, Mr. Chair. I'm just here to
Mr.
support.
Hecht, I do know that serving as a wingman, Stephen Fincher, is a little bit like being a choir boy. And so you've done your job. Mr. Fincher, welcome. Thank you
Thank you, Mr.
for
Chairman.
returning. I know you've spent several hours here. You get credit for that.
Thank you.
And the gentleman's recognized.
Well, I appreciate the time of the committee, the ranking member, and you, Chairman Sessions. I think all that's been said, it's been said. This is very, very important to America being competitive. Us offering this amendment, making sure that we keep jobs here, that we don't send them to China and Russia. This is an investment that has never lost the taxpayer money. $5 billion return to the Treasury over the last 20 years. $675 million last year. In 2006 was voice voted with many of my colleagues that now oppose it. I understand this has become very political, but Chairman, we're sent up to Washington by our constituents that asked us to do a job for them, and this is very, very important. I would plead with the committee to vote to make this in order, that we could be able to pass this. The Senate has shown us that the votes are there on their side. I think the votes are on our side. There are 60 co-sponsors to our bill, which is very similar to the Senate version. This is a common sense jobs bill. This is about American jobs, and I appreciate my colleague, Mr. Heck, and a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for supporting this valuable asset to our country. And again, I think I've said this many times, of all of the government agencies to get rid of, we're going to pick the one that's making money for the taxpayers. This is a reform bill, Chairman. I voted against reauthorization last time because we didn't get the reforms we needed. But we started day one after that vote, and we said, what can we do to make this better and make it work? We're probably doing more in the way of reforms since Ronald Reagan did many, many years ago. This is about putting American jobs ahead of China and Russia, and they are praying that we don't reauthorize this bank. And we owe it to our constituents to do that. So, again, I know our time is short, but it's a good piece of legislation that deserves our attention. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm aware that in Dallas, Texas, I think, leads the nation in jobs.
That's correct.
That might be provided with Ex-Im Bank. There are some 9,000 just immediately to the west side of the congressional district that I represent, but those people live, a good number of them, all over the Dallas area, so I don't want to go counting up necessarily where they live, but they call Dallas their home. And they have jobs, and their top-paying jobs pay about 40% more than other jobs because of the ability of the profession that they're in. It requires a master type of person to do this, and that's just one location. Thank you very much. Mr. Woodall.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say to Mr. Heck's point about unilateral disarmament, I think I'll stipulate that that's absolutely true. Having the absolute highest corporate tax rate in the world, also unilaterally damaging, failing to deal with your export credit agencies in any trade agreement that you sign anywhere on the planet means you will always be in the business of unilateral disarmament because you're not working on multilateral disarmament. And I wish that all of the faces that showed up at reauthorization time showed up at those other opportunities throughout the business cycle where we could make a difference so that this does not become the panic that it does now. I know the work you two have been doing. If it's going to happen, it will happen because the two of you are leading it, and I'm grateful to you for that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Woodall, for those comments. And again, this is not that complicated. This is pretty simple, but we've made it complicated. My wife, I was leaving home Sunday night, and she said, so one more week, right? And I said, I think. And she said, well, everything's expiring this week, so I know you guys will get something done. Let's don't wait till everything expires to keep doing things. Let's do the right thing. So, appreciate your comments.
Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Ms. Slaughter?
I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to plead with this committee to make this amendment in order because it doesn't make any sense not to do it. All of us represent businesses, small businesses that are being able to export because of this. It doesn't cost the taxpayer a dime, but creates jobs so that their community is better for it. It doesn't make any sense in the world to punish this. Did you say $5 billion, $6 billion comes back into the Treasury? Is that on a yearly basis?
About 600 million.
$5 billion over the last 20
Over
years.
the last 20 years. That's not a bad thing for us to have happen. We would appreciate that kind of money coming in. So please, please, folks, let's make that in order. We don't look very smart not being able to do a transportation bill, but this one is totally inexplainable. Please do that. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. Is there any Democrat, this gentleman from Massachusetts?
No, I just want to remind members of this committee, because sometimes I think we forget, based on sometimes the longevity of some of our hearings and the questions, that we are a committee that can make things in order. We are the Rules Committee. And whether you support your amendment, I support your amendment, or whether you oppose your amendment, we ought to give the House an opportunity to work its will. And if a majority say no, then it doesn't happen. If a majority say yes, then it happens. But we have making it in order doesn't mean you have to take a position in favor of it. And I support the amendment. I think you guys make great points, but just make it in order.
But the gentleman yield.
Yeah.
One reason why we're here is because I'm on the Financial Services Committee along with my colleague, Mr. Heck, and we have a very good chairman. He's a very principled man. He tries to do, for the most part, the right thing, but he would not allow us to move our bill through committee in regular order in the normal process. And that's why we're here today doing what we're doing in these very extraordinary times. So again, if we could have moved something through committee, we would have had a better product, a House product, but we didn't get that opportunity because our chairman fundamentally didn't like the idea of reauthorizing the Ex-Im Bank, so we were shut out. That's a real problem.
So I'll close with, again, a radical idea. Let the House work its will. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Colorado.
I think Mr. Woodall made a good point that if we want to negotiate multilateral changes to these types of credit agencies, we had that opportunity with TPA. We didn't do it. Certainly, we should continue with corporate tax reform. I know that's in the mix on transportation funding. But given where this is, clearly we should reauthorize. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything to even give away during a multilateral negotiation. And there's no reason that I've heard why we shouldn't do this, and if we can't do it through regular order, I think amendment's a great way to do it. So I strongly support, allowing the House to work its will on the amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Does any Republican seek time? Seeing none, I want to thank both gentlemen. Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to briefly identify with the comments that were so ably made by Mr. Heck and Mr. Fincher. I very much support the amendment and the bill or the language behind the amendment. I would wager that every single one of us elected campaigned had some kind of a plank in their campaign about creating jobs. And from what I've seen, the Export-Import Bank impact the job market in my state has been tremendous. I'm from the state of Washington. Over 40% of the jobs in my state can be attributed to trade, international trade. And this is one tool, not the only one, but one tool that has allowed us to be competitive in a very competitive world market. And so I just can't underscore enough the importance of giving our businesses, large and small, everything that we can to make them able to create those jobs that we all want, and allows them to be competitive and market their products around the world. And so I'm very glad that these two gentlemen bring this forward, and I would support making the rule in order as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The floor is waiting for us. We need to go down there. We will be able to come back about 15 minutes after the last vote. So subject to the call of the chair, we will come back.
If you don't mind, one quick, Zach, appreciate the gentleman being here for what they're, Zach from Office Marine, served in my office as an intern this summer. And I just wanted, he's getting ready to be gone here in weeks over when we get out. But he's been sitting through this. He experienced firsthand from a veteran's perspective and watching this committee work. And I
Zach,
think
thank you very much, and God bless the United States Marine Corps. I watched American Sniper this weekend for the first time. It gave me more. Thank you very much. The committee, Rules Committee is now going to recess, subject to call of the chair. No, we'll
That's what he said.
What are all these guys here for? Is that your date tonight?
No, I don't.
What are all these guys here for?
Did you close the hearing?
No. Rules Committee come to order, and I want to welcome the members back. As we had left, I had not closed the hearing on the HR 3236 Service Transportation Veterans Health Care Choice Improvement Act 2015, and I wanted to see if any member was seeking to address the committee. Seeing none, the chairman will now be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina. Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 1994, the VA Accountability Act of 2015, structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate, equally divided, controlled by the chair and ranking minority member. Committee on Veterans Affairs, the rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. Rule makes an order as original text for the purpose of amendment. The amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Veterans Affairs now printed in the bill and provides it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. Rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 3236, Surface Transportation and Veterans Health Care Choice Improvement Act of 2015. Under a closed rule, the rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided among and controlled by the respective chairs and ranking minority members of the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Ways and Means, and Veterans Affairs. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit.
You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina. Is there discussion or amendment to that?
Yes,
Gentlewoman from New York.
Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment. Thank you. I move the committee make an order and give the necessary waivers for the amendment to H.R. 3236 by Representative Fincher, number 1, which would reform and reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. I think we made it pretty clear in a fairly good discussion here that for many of us, and that we believe that the majority of the House would very much like to see this done, and I made a fairly maudlin plea, I believe, to my colleagues to please try to make this in order. I think it's a sensible thing for us to do. I think we would all go home early, feeling better about having accomplished something. So I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you very much. Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, based on the testimony we heard today and plus numerous other amounts of information that we've received about what the implications were to be if we didn't act on the XM Bank, I think not to do so, given all that we know, would be breathtakingly irresponsible. We know that our economy will take a hit if we don't act before we recess, and I would urge my colleagues, even if you don't agree with it, to make it an order. That's what this committee does. Sometimes we forget that, but we are the committee that can make things in order. And we ought to let Democrats and Republicans work their will on this issue, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman from Florida. Gentleman, Judge Hayes is recognized.
The ranking member and Mr. McGovern, and I asked the question, can we definitively say that this is going to be the last measure that's going to be on the floor tomorrow, or is there any other opportunity where the XM Bank may very well be considered?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the question. In my opinion, there would not be other matters that would be on the floor through the rule. Yes, sir. Further questions, discussion, debate? Any member? We'll now have the vote on the slaughter amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
Roll call.
The noes have it, noes have it. Gentlewoman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Yes. Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Aye. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
6 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. For the amendment or discussion, gentlemen.
That's a close vote. And I regret very much the way it turned out for the economy. I have another amendment. I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 1994 and H.R. 3236, each an open rule, so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments on the floor.
Now heard the motion from the amendment from the gentleman from Massachusetts. Further discussion? Vote now be on the amendment from the gentleman. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Noes have it, noes have it. Gentleman asks for a roll call vote. Clerk will.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing nothing further, we'll now vote on the motion from the gentlewoman from Vice Chairman of the Committee from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it, ayes have it.
And I'd like a roll.
Gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Can I say something?
Excuse me,
about this for
excuse
just
me.
a sec? If that's
Pending the vote.
appropriate.
Pending the vote.
Okay.
I'd like to
No.
vote and then give the gentleman, unless you'd like further discussion.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Then let's go ahead and let's vote, and then I'll come right back to the gentleman. Thank you very much. Clerk will please poll the committee.
Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne? Aye. Mr. Byrne, aye. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis? No. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
9 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to. I will be handling this for Republicans.
Mr. Polis.
Mr. Polis for Democrats. If the gentlewoman seeks time, gentlewoman's recognized.
I do. I just feel compelled to say today, we say the same thing every time we meet. We might as well phone it in. We don't have a chance over here of getting an amendment or anything else to do. And the closed rules and the shutdown of this process, the inability to even discuss something that we've already know there are over, at least over 200 people, members of this House have signed, would like to have us vote on. And this Rules Committee won't allow that. And I will tell you, I think that this adds to really a litany of shame for what we've done here. We waive all kinds of rules for anything. Germaneness doesn't seem to matter. And we even passed one appropriations bill out of here that had been rewritten after the committee had adjourned. I just have to express this afternoon my displeasure at what's going on here, and hope to goodness that since we're all going home early because we don't have any work to do, that we would contemplate what we're here for and maybe spend a little time reading Jefferson's manual so that we can understand what the real obligations are of the member of the House of Representatives. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am, and I thank the gentlewoman. Her comments are always,
take it in the spirit in which she meant it. I do understand much of what the gentleman was speaking about. I harbor some frustrations myself about transportation, about the things which need to be done. I've struggled with, you have, this committee has year after year, the hard work that members of this committee put on, that our staff puts on. We put things, we try and do the very best we can. We treat each other well, and I do recognize, and I believe I see the wisdom behind what you're saying. And yet sometimes the timing and these things as they play out, as the
Can't
gentleman.
possibly be. We've extended the highway bill for 34 times. And let me tell you that there's word all all I could hear when we were down doing those votes is that there aren't enough votes to pass the transportation extension.
Well,
Now,
what I'm hopeful.
And we're gonna disgrace ourselves with that and leave town. Is that
Well,
that the thing?
you
we
know,
do?
that is certainly one way to look at it. I think the way I'd like to look at it is, and.
Don't say that we worked our will, because we haven't done,
I haven't said
our
that
will
yet.
doesn't come into it.
I haven't said that yet. I remember last December when Chairman Schuster showed up here and talked about what he was attempting to do and felt like he'd have time. The Senate has only now, as of today, begun taking up that process. In the constitutional avenues and the way things work around here, we really do want people to work, and we do want them to do it, and they're just now taking it up. So
You know, there isn't enough evidence to convict you in court on that statement,
Well,
that you
in
really
fact-
want things to work.
Well,
I've
I
never
really
seen it,
do.
the monkey wrenches thrown into the legislative process.
But you see, in some respects, I know what you're saying, but in other respects, we're not leaving town to let the transportation bill die.
Mr. Chairman?
What we're trying to do.
What are we doing if we
well,
don't extend it?
Then we passed today this bill which allows HR 3236. And we're handling the VA problem, and we're handling problems before. So
Well,
I just think we're
wanted
trying to
give
do
you a
some
hint
things.
that everything that I'm hearing is that there are not enough votes in the House
Well,
to pass the extension on
you know what?
transportation. That may or may not be true,
I
but it
hope
certainly
it's
is
not.
making the
I
rounds.
hope it's not. And you know
Okay.
what? I enjoy working with you and all the members of this committee, and you have been good to me, and all of us have been good to each other, and Mr. Polis especially this year has tried to be nice to me with some ideas that I'm trying to present.
What are you
So
up
I
to?
guess Yeah, he is. He's a good guy.
Well,
But I
everybody's
do know
good
that
guys.
there's
These are
dis-
good people.
Okay, but there's some
They wouldn't
disappointment
be here
that's
if they weren't
harbored.
good people and didn't want to
Okay,
move
so
this
Bill
country
Schuster,
forward. Let's
but if
do
Bill
it.
Schuster showed up here and he was really frustrated and we weren't
He
helping
was.
him, well, we tried to help him. I did what he asked for him to do, and
Okay.
that's what we have done
All right.
today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just
sir.
a point of clarification, because when we go back to our districts, we're going to be asked questions about why the Fincher, why we couldn't deal with the XM Bank issue before we went into recess. And as Mr., I know that you're going to talk about the germaneness issue. That doesn't fly anymore. We're the Rules Committee.
We know better than that.
We can waive that, and given the time urgency on that. But I mean, clearly, we're leaving early. We could have found another way to bring it to the floor, but I guess I'm trying to understand the rationale for not dealing with the issue at all, whether it's in this bill or another bill, or, given the bipartisan support to extend it, I'm just trying to understand why can't we have this opportunity? You had a bipartisan duo come up here to testify. I'm just trying to understand the rationale. What do I go back and say to my constituents? Or, God forbid, what Mr. Heck had talked about, where that some major manufacturers might want to leave and offshore their business because of the inability to compete. What do you say to people? What is the reason why we can't have that vote?
These are good
What
questions.
is the reason? I seriously don't
Well,
know.
the chairman,
doesn't cost us
the
anything?
chairman of the committee has asked us not to have a vote on the issue. You know that, and I do too.
All right.
And the gentleman
The
is.
chairman of the transportation committee?
No, sir. No,
Oh.
ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think what you're just getting is a sense of some of the frustration. I don't think anybody means any of this in any unkind way.
I don't
No,
even
I
take it
don't.
that way.
Don't
Yeah.
mean it
I
that
don't,
kind of.
And-
I hope that
Just
I have not taken
frustration.
it.
No, and I know that there's similar frustration among members of your own conference
be
with regard to
correct.
these issues. So, when there's something that we know, maybe 2/3 of the House and Senate both want to do, there's just a great frustration about how we can't seem to have it happen. And,
Well,
and
you and
that's-
I were hopeful the Senate might have done something over the weekend.
Right.
It's taken them a little bit longer.
It's never a good strategy to wait on the Senate to do
It
something.
is never a
Yeah.
good strategy. Is there anything further from this committee? I want to thank each of you, and I hope that you have the very best of a month off. If I can be of assistance, I hope you'll call on me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
I want to know what I could do.
Yeah.
Can you?
Pete, how comes Polish gets